Hi guys, welcome to another episode of U.S. History with Lennox, and today we're talking about one of those real big U.S. history terms. One of those terms that's dropped every now and then as evidence, but sometimes it's not explained in depth. Today, we're talking about manifest destiny. That's right. Manifest destiny, that idea that America had this God-given right to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But how did we get to that point? How did we get to this idea that we were supposed to expand from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific? We started to see some specific trends start to grow during the 1800s. Specifically during Antebellum America. And this time period is generally considered from 1800 to 1860. Leading up to the Civil War. Now, one of the first trends that started to develop during this time was increased democracy in our system. And we're going to see a new two-party system emerge. Now, our first two-party system was the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. During the era of good feelings, they're going to kind of dissipate and go away. By the 1820s, two new parties are going to start to rise. The Democrats and the Whigs, and they'll predominantly be in place until the 1850s. We're also going to see in the 1820s the introduction of universal white male suffrage. That's when property requirements and other restrictions were taken away, allowing more American white men to vote during this time period. We also see our economy start to grow. We see a national market emerge during this time, predominantly due to the War of 1812. After that, America had to become economically self-sufficient. So you're going to see this rise of industry in our country, which is going to lead to urbanization or the growth of cities, as well as an increase in immigration because we have more jobs to offer. We also see a new cash crop coming to the forefront in the South, cotton. And cotton is going to honestly become the economic foundation of our country going into the mid to late 1800s. What cotton is going to do, more importantly, though, is ingrain slave labor as the predominant labor system in the South, and we will become dependent on that. Federal power is going to increase, meaning our government's going to have more power. We started to see that early in the 1800s with Jefferson's purchase of Louisiana, but we also saw it with the American system when that was introduced by Henry Clay. And no one personified growing federal power more than Andrew Jackson when he started using the veto on things such as the National Bank. New intellectual and religious movements are going to come forth in the 1830s, 1840s, predominantly the Second Great Awakening and Transcendentalism. They're going to have a huge effect on American society moving forward. And you're going to see especially that Second Great Awakening influencing people like Harriet Beecher Stowe and the abolition movement. Social reformer, that also spurs out of these new intellectual and religious reforms. Basically, we're talking temperance, abolition, women's rights, the cult of domesticity, this idea that women's sphere of influence is in the home and that's where they should stay. And then you're going to see the rise of public education as well as reform with regards to our prisons and mental asylums. All of this is going to lead to this goal for further westward expansion. And we're going to see our country start to grow. And that's where manifest destiny comes in. Manifest destiny is this term that describes what we think was obviously the destiny for our country. This divine intervention to come in and allow our country to spread all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But where did this term come from? How did it get its start? We typically credit John O'Sullivan with this term. Now, he was a newspaper editor, and he first used this term in print in 1845 in an editorial. But it wasn't all of a sudden in 1845 that he came up with this term. He actually was writing about it in 1839. Now, O'Sullivan was a firm believer in Jacksonian democracy, and he is the one who wrote for the first time that America had this divine destiny to move westward. He said the purpose of this destiny was to, quote, establish on earth the moral dignity and salvation of man. The idea that America was going to basically be the moral compass is kind of introduced during this time. And this term manifest destiny is going to be used to justify westward expansion, especially when we engage in the Mexican-American War, as well as during our dispute with Great Britain over the actual border of the Oregon Territory. Now, manifest destiny wasn't just a term, it was actually an action, because it's going to spur people to start to move west. And during this time period, 1840 to 1860, those people seeking manifest destiny, those people moving west, nearly 250,000 of them are going to travel over numerous trails that are going to be forged by earlier American explorers. When we look at Western exploration between 1800 to 1830, we're going to see the efforts of men who will blaze trails that are going to be used to fulfill our, quote, manifest destiny. Now, Lewis and Clark are going to be the first ones to head out there, the core of discovery that's going to be implemented by Thomas Jefferson. And you can see that they're going to make it all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But they're not alone in exploration. People like Zebulon Pike are going to break off of their exploration, and he's going to go and explore the plains and the Rocky Mountains. Pike's Peak gets its name from Zebulon Pike. Stephen Long is going to be tasked with going into the Great Plains and just ridding the United States of any remnant British troops or British fur trappers out there after the War of 1812. He's going to end up mapping the Great Plains, and this particular trail is going to become very important to the American economy. Jedediah Smith, I always have to laugh at this because this guy goes all over the place. But from 1822 to 1830, he will be the first American to actually explore California. And then finally, John C. Fremont. John C. Fremont, he is also going to explore parts of California, but he's also going to map the overland trails that will lead to Oregon and California. Basically, this is the guy who maps out the Oregon Trail. Now, some of these Western trails weren't just about settlers moving west. Some of them had a different purpose. I mentioned Stephen Long and the Santa Fe Trail. Well, what this allowed America to do was trade with Texas. And this is very important to the U.S. economy. So not only are we trading with European countries now we're trading with countries in the West as well. And the Santa Fe Trail is going to be the route that we use to send a lot of our goods into Texas. But the Oregon Trail, as you know, is going to lead to the majority of people heading west, trying to get to the Oregon Territory. 1840s, they're going to move into the Oregon Territory. This is going to cause a little bit of conflict between the United States and Great Britain. If you remember correctly, during James Monroe's presidency, John Quincy Adams negotiated a treaty with Great Britain in which we were going to share the Oregon Territory. Well, what's happening now is you have a lot of Americans moving in there, which is going to cause a little conflict with Great Britain because are we really sharing it or are we trying to take it over? And that's going to cause another treaty to come to play. The California Trail, that's the route we're going to take once gold is discovered in California in 1849. You're going to see a lot of traders and ranchers move into that direction as well. All of these trails, though, were mapped out by those early explorers that I shared with you earlier. When we look at the pioneers who moved west, there were a lot of different motivating factors, pull factors, if you will. The Oregon Trail primarily attracted farmers trying to get out to the Willamette Valley. Very fertile area, great for farming. The California Trail, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, man, that attracted a lot of gold seekers. Once gold was discovered in California, you had a lot of people headed out there trying to get rich quick. But you also had people who were seeking things that were very familiar to Americans, the idea of religious freedom. The Mormon Trail, which broke off of the Oregon Trail going into Utah, was used primarily to escape religious persecution in the Midwest. Women played a huge role in westward expansion. In fact, the further west you move, and this is a concept you should try to remember, the further west we move, the more independent women are. You see an increase of egalitarianism, this idea of equality that women appreciate in the West. Women are going to get a lot more political freedom and equality the further west you go. In fact, it started in the great state of Wyoming, which will be the first state in the Union to give women the right to vote. So why did women have more equality or more independence as they moved west? Quite honestly, demand. I mean, they needed it. There were so few people who lived out west that you had to work together. It wasn't that just women were supposed to stay at home. They had to work side by side with the men to build these ranches, to build these farms, to make it down these trails. The cult of domesticity was more of an Eastern thing. The women in the East had the, freedom to stay at home and focus on their families, where the women in the West, they had to work. And so because of that, they had a lot more independence and, like I said, a lot more political influence as well. Even though women practiced a lot of political equality in the West, you're not going to see this spread very quickly to the East. This map shows you where women in the West actually had full voting rights before the 19th Amendment. But notice on the East, all those orange states, these are states where women did not get the right to vote in federal elections until after the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. So, manifest destiny, this idea of westward expansion, is going to become the foundation, honestly, for politics and economics moving forward. The idea was that America had this God-given right, this divine destiny to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And while this sounds romantic and it sounds exciting, it comes at a big cost. A cost that will eventually lead us to the American Civil War. But more on that later. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next time around where we talk about the Mexican-American War.